civilization
The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by DeCarolis Insurance Agency at www.decarolisinsuranceagency.com.
6:15 informational meeting with the mayor relative to some updates, new department heads, as well as grants that the city is involved in. Apparently, there was some kind of scheduling miscommunication, so the mayor is not attending the meeting this evening, but will do so in the future. So, again, there won't be any informational meeting with the mayor this evening. We do, however, have a planning board review, which is a creature of our charter. Section 5.6 of our charter provides that the city council shall at least once during each two-year term hold a joint meeting with each multiple member body of the city for the purpose of sharing information and concerns. Where appropriate, the city council may meet with two or more multiple member bodies which deal with the same or related subject matters at the same meeting. So as I indicated, tonight we have the planning board, and it is 6:30, and it's time for us to start. I don't think we have enough seats inside the chamber there. I don't know that we need to all, if you want to just speak from the podium, that's fine with me, or do you guys want to come in and sit at the tables?
Yeah. Grab some of the chairs.
One up in the back. Back row.
Yeah.
Back row right here too. Just pull a couple up right there. Move this up. Look at this. Bang.
There we go.
I'll stagger.
I can see much better now. Lean over the rim.
You got box seats and grandstand.
Tom said you're gonna go inside the box.
I'm just going to sit next to him so I can kick him in his bad leg.
See what he does.
What's that? All the time, right? Al, it's been 25 years.
All right, I'd like to thank the planning board for a robust turnout this evening. I did have a brief conversation with the planning chair about the purpose of tonight, and I think Mr. Souza understands that the council will have some questions, I'm sure, but the general idea is we'd like to get an update as to what's going on with your board, sort of a snapshot of what's gone on in the last year, what sort of matters are pending, are there any matters of critical concern, are there any needs of the planning board, those sorts of things, and I'm sure you'll give us a nice update on all of that. So I think we should probably start with the chair introducing himself and the planning director, as well as the full contingent of the planning board, and then I'll let you take it over, Mr. Souza.
John Souza, chairman. Introduce in sequential order of longevity. Actually, Sal Ciccone has been in the board for 33 years. I have 32. Carol has 25. Tom
27.
Kerrigan, who's not, 27. Tom Kerrigan has 16.
He's here.
Oh, here he, I didn't see him, he snuck in on me. Pat Pearl, I think, is 10. Paul Reiser, 7. Jason and Pay and Dean Valier, 1 each. So it gives a total of around 125 years of experience.
That's a
We
lot
might get it
of
right
years. Just for the
Just close
record,
to
Carol
John's
is
age.
Carol Vittorioso Gallagher, is that, and you're the vice chair, right?
That's
Thank
correct,
you.
Attorney Bedanza,
And
President.
additionally, we have Elizabeth Wood, who is your professional
Correct.
planning director. Okay. So do you want to give us a brief overview of the last year of the Leominster Planning Board's activities?
As you have a thing here in front of you. I want to have Elizabeth to pass those out.
Okay.
We've got a printed copy that Elizabeth done a lot of research and put this all together to give you a thumbnail, pretty
Great.
much of all the different projects we worked on.
Thank you,
I think you'll
Elizabeth.
see in there that we have, we're an active board, and we operate in a number of different areas to support the city. and its residents. The first part is site plans, and those are, is that on? Site plans and approvals. And you get the approximate dates. Now Brooks Pond is that new, that's the assisted living portion of it. We're finalizing the original Brooks Pond now, okay? And we're gonna have some more information on that, I think, next week. But as you can see, we've got quite a few different projects that we worked on, and most of them were site plans, and that's primarily a business where we, it's the parking and the setup and the, and what we do there, and working with those people, landscaping and traffic. The second part is we've only had a couple of subdivisions, one on Mary Avenue and one on Willard Street. Willard Street is in construction at this time. They've started. That was a rather difficult one because of the wetlands and the proximity to Samoset and those wetlands, and some problems with the roadway. So we had a remand on that, and we got that taken care of. Mary Avenue has been completed, and they finally applied to us with the Homeowners Association, so they'll be going forward. You see there's quite a few special permits that we have, and those are all different, for different reasons. Some of it's because it's in the Water Supply Protection District, so it will just come to us where we make a recommendation to you. Approval not required is kind of a misnomer, but it's true. It's where you take, if somebody has a singular lot and they want to put a house on it, so, or if they have a lot where they want to split, or they had two lots and they want to split it, or and sometimes somebody wants to put in a driveway or a barn, they don't have enough land, they'll then move the boundaries, and that goes to the approval not required, and we have to approve that. And what I would say is not required, pretty much, if they follow all the state requirements, it's pretty much, it's accepted. Okay, but we just want to make sure they follow the state requirements. Next section is the city council petitions, and you see there's quite a few things going back and forth with that. And we've done that, and we've covered quite a few, all kinds of different articles in the floodplain, hearings on amendment to different zoning and things like that. Each one of them is explained. If anybody's got any questions, anytime.
John, just as a housekeeping item, you mentioned subdivisions and special permits. Were those intended to be listed on this document as well? That
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say for a note, we've been operating, this is a housekeeping matter, we've been operating upstairs for the past 3 months due to remodeling in the office. And I ran downstairs to use the other copier just now, and I realized I didn't copy it appropriately. So the list that some of you have, I made some copies earlier that have all of them, but then I made additional copies for tonight that don't list it. So I can email it out to everybody.
That would be fine. Email it to the clerk, and she'll distribute it to us.
That was my fault.
Yeah, no problem. You did, there's only 2 subdivisions, which is the more, probably the most critical part of those 2 items. John, those, in your opinion, are adequately bonded and will stay that way? You know, one of the things is a few councilors, and myself included, that are very concerned about unaccepted streets, and we don't want to certainly add to the list. And I would personally ask you to be as scrupulous as possible when it comes to that.
Just to give you an idea, yes, we have, on both of those, they're on We have we've revised a lot of things. We've worked with, Elizabeth worked with the county, okay, and the Register of Deeds, and we've came up with a new process, so that now, as she set it up, we now will be holding all the deeds and the covenants, okay, before they start selling. So we'll have control of that. We know, I agree with you wholeheartedly, the bonding, we're gonna be much more judicious with the bonding, and I've got some, in the future, some zoning changes or subdivision changes where we're gonna change the percentages and when we bond projects. We've also found that there's some old projects, and kind of an interesting little story, Loctite on Francis Street built the original building, I don't know, 30 years ago, and in there was supposed to be a detention pond. Well, here they came to us recently. They now have some stuff coming to us. They want to expand. Guess what? The detention pond was never built 30 years ago. So we said, and that we fed a few others. So we're now working on a new ordinance, a change, that we're going to put on site plans, we're going to do bonding. So it won't only be on a subdivision, but because what happens is the building inspector will approve the site plan for the building and the plumbing and electrical and all the rest of that, does not have much concern with the parking lots or the drainage or the water and stuff like that. It's sort of out of his or her purview. So we're taking that back, and we're going to try, we're now working to come up with a process. We'll actually have bonding on buildings as well as roads.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Okay? The second thing is where we stand, like we got one coming up, and I think we all heard of Katy Lane.
Yep.
Okay? We actually have $116,000 of theirs that we're still holding. They're coming in, that we have a whole letter. I think Elizabeth's got the information on Katy Lane and all the issues that we have with that. You get that, Elizabeth?
I have a letter up in the office.
Oh, no, it's all right, forget it. But it's pretty much down to the road, and one of the interesting things we found, on their drawing, it showed the layout, the cutout of the road. And it showed 1.5 foot of gravel and some rock, and then a sub-pavement, and then a top pavement. Well, what they did is they used grindings for the base. So it looks like, and that's now falling apart. So we may have to use that money that we have to take and rebuild that road, and they'll have to do it at that expense. But
All right.
we have, I think we have enough money to do it.
Well, all right, so I think at this juncture, what I'm going to do is go right around the council and council by council, see if they have any questions for you or the board. And I'll start off with Councilor Frida.
First of all, let me thank you for all coming down. I think it's important, obviously the charter has that section in it for a reason. Although you work on your own and you're your own entity, we confirm appointments, and I think it's important. We hear the backlash sometime, you know, when people are rude in some of these different boards or commissions over the years. I mean, I go back 36 years, and 16 years as a ward councilor. I attended many, many planning board meetings, and many meetings trying to correct some of the things that happened in the 80s and the early 90s, you know, with the job that you had, just trying to straighten things out. So I guess my point is that the degree of professionalism in your board, I've been there many times. There have been many shouting matches. There's always people that are upset. I mean, it's something in their neighborhood they're not used to. It's people's right to build, and it's very difficult sometimes to point that out to someone else that's lived there for 30 years, that you can't stop that. They have a right to do that. So, you know, your job is not an easy one for most part of the time. But I think for us to get information back and forth, and, to see, just the fact that you're all here tonight, I think says a lot about attendance at the meetings and caring about the community, because we're all working for the same thing. We're all working for the people in the city, one way or another. So I just think that section of the charter is important for us to review, and keep in mind who we're putting on these boards and commissions when the name comes down to us. Be sure that it's somebody that is qualified, somebody that, can follow the process, and that can be able to do the job that they're looking to do. So I don't have a lot of questions, but I did want to put that complimentary piece out because I think that's important as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Frida. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr?
No, thank you very much. I really don't have any questions, but it is very nice to see everybody here tonight. And it's really nice for the public also because, people that haven't had dealings with the planning board, they can see all of you here tonight, and then they can put a name with a face and the important work that you do. As a city councilor, I rely on your expertise and all of your expertise when it comes to matters that we refer to you, or if we have a constituent problem, when we, advocate for a specific constituent at one of your meetings. I very much appreciate, the expertise and all of the experience that I know each of you bring to the table. So thank you for coming down tonight, and it's nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shalfo Zephyr. Councilor Angelini?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the planning board, Sal Chaconi, 33 years.
Councilor Angelini, could you use your microphone so we can hear you on this end? Is it not working?
Okay.
There you go.
Here it is.
Thank you.
I know you open your meetings generally by saying you're the Board of Permitted Uses. You still do that?
That's correct.
All right. So tell me, in this sort of formal but informal setting that we're in, do you think that you have the adequate tools for zoning? Let me give you, for instance, the Water Supply Protection District overlay, hospital overlay, these overlay districts are working as intended at the time they were passed? Or
I believe they have. We've had some issues where things haven't been perfectly followed with the overlay with some new stuff, but that's another issue. But the majority of the time with the overlays, and it even comes into, we're getting a presentation at our next meeting from the Recreation Committee and their open space program. And they make specific comments on in that report of the overlay districts in the water protection district in residential A and rural residential. So it shows where we work with and they also take into account in that report the open space homes that we have. So we have quite a few subdivisions are open space, and what that is where you do a grid. You say, I got 24 acres. I'll just use round figures. With roads and everything else, I can put in 24 houses. And they can put in 24 houses on a grid on that 24 acres. But now what we found is they can go back, and rather than half-acre lots, when they go back to quarter-acre lots, build the same 24 houses in 12 acres. These are round figures. We now have open space that will be forever protected. So you have these little enclaves that's been going on all over the city, and that's now part of the Recreation Department and their open space plan. So it's taken us a long time, but there's a lot of acreage in the city that has now been protected by the open space program.
I would agree with
Councilor, I think we need more protection in the watershed areas. My feeling, we've had a lot of projects coming for new energy projects. And these new energy projects, they rape our forests, and they create a problem down the road. So I think that we need to take a look at where we are there and what we can do about some of those things.
Well, thank you, Counselor. Not Counselor.
No.
Yeah, he just got promoted.
Just say.
33 years, you should probably be a counselor.
That's right.
Just have to move to Leominster. I know this, some of my colleagues have some more pointed questions, but one thing that I'm finding a lot of my constituents in Ward 5 are concerned about, and that's like what I would describe as urban creep. And, you know, some of these older residential homes on, you know, Merriam Avenue look very attractive to some folks who think opening a law office or a small medical practice. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure at some point to change the zoning, to allow some of those uses, and I just, I'm firmly opposed to that. I just like to go on record. I'm not a big fan. I think the people in Residence A deserve, you know, that enclave is sacred, and I think that as long as we all sort of remember that, put ourselves in their shoes, I think we'll be better off in the long run. And with that, I'll yield the floor.
Very well. Thank you, Councilor Angelini. Councilor Arndinger.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't really have any questions because, you know, it's interesting to watch the work that you do. And as the President had mentioned earlier, the concerns with the unapproved roads, I am just happy as a pig in a pile of manure to see that you're making some changes to that, because that's a headache that I think we all live with all the time. You know, people complaining, why can't I get my road paved? Why can't I get my road paved? Well, until we can, you know, come up with a process of getting all those things accepted, it's going to be a continuing problem. But I'm glad to see that you're doing it, that you're addressing it and taking care of it. It was just, and it's been a little bit of an education for me tonight, listening to what you've done. So I appreciate that, and thank you very much.
On your roads, Elizabeth, can you give a thumbnail on some of the things where we are on the roads?
We have about, I realize we have 17.1 miles of roads that are not accepted. That was what the figure for the DPW. And we're working with the DPW right now to write a letter to the mayor to let him know that we have exhausted, is this the path you want me to go down? Okay, to let him know that in some cases we have some funds available that we can approach and do some road improvements. But in some cases, we're out of luck. The developer is no longer available. He's no longer alive. He's no longer in the area, or he's not committed to the project any longer, and the houses have already been built. So we've decided, and I know the council has been working very, very hard on this. You've done a huge report on this. We've decided that we need to ask the mayor to look at a line item in the budget to each year address the long-term upkeep or bringing the unaccepted roads up to city standards so that they can be accepted. So this is something the board is getting behind. We have a draft letter, but we're waiting. We want to do it together as a joint city with the DPW. So we're waiting to get some more facts and figures from them. They've prioritized the 3 top roads that they think should be first, brought it up to acceptance with maintenance repairs, or not maintenance repairs, but just bringing them up to upgrades. Okay. And we want to item dollar amount for each road, why, how much it's going to be to bring each of those roads up to speed, and why they were prioritized over other roads, because it's going to be hard to justify that to a city full of 17 miles you have. So why would someone get prioritized before someone else? So we're going to approach the mayor on that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All set, Councilor Arndinger?
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Thank you guys for coming down. Ms. Wood, thank you. You will have, I can pledge my support to get that to the mayor and get those streets accepted. Thank you guys for all you do. I have no questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor David Cormier.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. We appreciate it. I just have one, maybe two questions now. Ava Way is one of those streets. This $10,000, I'm just wondering where that stands. I think the last time we met, we were looking to get that money and make the improvements and get the road accepted.
I have a recent update on Ava Way, if you'd like to hear it. We recently, the board voted to take the remaining funds that were available in the bond, which was about $10,000, and make a list of road improvements. It's not going to cover everything that the DPW says should be covered, but it is going to cover the bounds, the as-builts, the street plans. There's like 5 different things that are going to be brought up to speed, and we are working with Whitman and Bingham. They had the lowest bid. So we actually signed a contract with them to do the work.
Oh, good.
So they're going to be doing that hopefully this season.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. One other quick question. I was working on, even though it was Ward 1, I was working on this quite a bit. I was helping Councilor Feckley out because I knew she was ill and I didn't want to burden her with a lot of this stuff. But we were looking to accept Massapog and Dobson Circle within the past year or two. And one of the things I realized was that the subdivision had been proposed quite a few years prior to when it was actually built, which happens every now and then, because there was an issue with there was a question about the detention pond, and there was something in the subdivision regulations about a certain date in there. I can't remember all the details, but if it was built before a certain date, that there was
Okay.
Right. So my question is this, but I think it was proposed before that deadline because there was an issue about who was going to maintain it. There was some language in the subdivision regulations, and it was proposed before a certain item in the subdivision regulations went into effect. So I guess my question is this: in general, how many subdivisions do we have that have been approved over the years, but have not been built out either at all, or maybe they're partially built? Like, are there still any that are outstanding, from?
The only ones that are in process is the 2 we talked about tonight.
Right.
And we went by Willard Street the other day, and that's in process. Ava Way has not been allowed to start until they have finished their homeowners association, so they haven't got the okay from the building inspector yet. But they have only, I don't know if they've started doing groundwork or not, but that's in the beginning process, and we'll be holding the bonds on those.
So
Liggett Hill is expired.
Okay, that was what I was going to use for an example, because,
Yeah,
right, so that one's expired, yeah.
It has expired. He had originally, I think it was like around 2005, and then they ran to 2008, and he had 7 years, but then the state, because of the problems in 2008, what happened was the state gave everybody 7 years extension. So they brought him up to 14 or 16, all depends how you added it up. He's long since gone by it. They had done some prep work. They've been so notified, if they want to come back, they have to come back with a new plan.
Okay. So basically, to the best of your knowledge, there are no subdivisions in the city that have been approved, years ago that are still, so in other words, we're not going to have some subdivision pop up and say, well, where did that come from? And they're going to say, well, that was approved back in 2001. Like, for example, the Samoset Drive and all that, I mean, that was approved back in like 2000, and they just built the last house there, I don't know, a few years ago.
Yeah.
Are there any others that are out there that could still,
I don't know.
Because
I'd have to look, I'd have to go
Sometimes
back
these
and look
things-
in our records.
We're doing an inventory of our files
Yeah.
that's underway, that should be completed within the year.
Right.
We've been temporarily on hold because of the office shuffle, but we will have a lot more information on that if you ask us in
Yeah.
6 or 9 months.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'd be curious to know, because sometimes these things, they pop up, and, then you look back, and it's like, well, yeah, that was approved 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Kind
Well-
of gets buried, but, the developer doesn't
But
forget.
if 15 years ago, anything after 7, it's dead.
It's dead.
They
Okay.
have to come back,
Okay.
okay? So
That's a great question, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have these going through my mind as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, when you compile that,
We'll take a look. What
send
we're
that over
doing
to us.
is,
Yeah.
we had, you have different people in the office, and sometimes they file it by streets.
Yep.
Sometimes they file it by the subdivision, sometimes it got filed by the developer. So what we've been doing is taking each cabinet, going way back, and picking up the dates and coming up with a spreadsheet so that we'll have it all digitized, so we'll have it cross-referenced. So if anybody comes with a street number, a developer, or a name, we'll be able to backtrack it to that.
Mr. Souza, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to start the meeting, and then we'll recess, and we can continue. So
Okay.
if you join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll now take the roll call of the councilors present, starting with Councilor Frida.
Present.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Present.
Councilor Angelini.
Present.
Councilor Arndinger.
Present.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Present.
Councilor David Cormier.
Present.
And I shall be recorded as present. We have 7 councilors in attendance. Does the chairman of records have a report?
Yes, Mr. President, I've reviewed the minutes for August 23rd, 2021, and find them to be in order and ask that they be placed on file.
That may be done. I'll now entertain a motion for recess.
I'll make that
Councilor
motion.
Shalfo Zephyr, seconded Councilor Frida. All those in favor of recess, please recognize the usual manner. We are in recess, and you may continue, Councilor David Cormier and Mr. Souza.
Thank you very much. No, I think I appreciate all those answers to the questions. Yeah, and it would, just be nice to know kind of, and it's good to know that anything over 7 years is dead, because, some of these things have kind of surprised me, when they've come along and you start doing the research and, looking into, language and what was proposed in a homeowners association, and, asking about, one of the things that I asked that's coming back to me now about Massapog and Dobson Circle was about money for the detention pond. And, we found out that the developer didn't have to put any into that fund because it was applied for before the subdivision regulations that are currently on the books were on the
Right.
books. So that was kind of, some interesting stuff that I found. And, it sounds like that kind of stuff is probably going to all be gone away now, because there can't possibly be anything that old still lingering that somebody can.
Not that I know of. We've worked hard, and, I try to get away from these surprises, and as we find them, we do things. We come, we try to, we're looking at dumpsters, and we're gonna be having a new ordinance, a city ordinance, that we're gonna propose on dumpsters, because we found there's been a number of issues with site plans coming in, and there's no real regulation on where a dumpster should be, where, whether it should be covered up some way, and how it's gonna fit into your traffic pattern. We found those to be issues. Recently, we had some complaints about tow yards, and it's just basically a junkyard. It's not a junkyard. They just take derelict cars that they pick up off the road, and there's all kinds of cars in a spot, and there's no really licensing to them. There's nothing. They're just there, and they just by happenstance. So we're looking at creating a new ordinance to cover the tow yards. We're looking at new, like I said, conditions on the site plans, change there, where we'll actually put on a site plan, we'll put a bond for getting the landscaping and parking done separate from the building. And I just want to make a comment on the staff. Stephanie and Elizabeth, they've gone way above and beyond. They ran into a real problem with mold in this building. And I don't know if you know it or not, but they've been displaced for, I don't know,
Since
most of
May.
the summer, since May. And they've been working upstairs in room 10 and downstairs and in the building inspector's office, and they're still getting things done. So to me, I mean, that really shows being real good city employees, and that we want to look forward to with them.
Councilor David Cormier, are you all set?
I'm good, thank you very much.
I'll be with you in a moment, Councilor Frida. I just want to reiterate a point that came up in earlier discussion this evening, I believe with Councilor Hardinger. For me, as you probably are aware, the marquee issue for the planning board for a long time has been the acceptance of streets. It's a real bread and butter issue that affects homeowners and residents, and I've seen it as a ward councilor and even before that. Back about 5 years ago, I did a report on it. I came up with a list of prioritization or higher priority streets, and I echo what the director suggests. One of the arguments in the past has been that there's been a political reluctance to address a particular street because there are a lot of people in line. And then, the precedent gets created and so on and so forth. Well, I do believe, as the director indicated, that there's a way to prioritize because a lot of these streets are in very different situations. Some of them just require legal matters to be resolved. Others require significant construction. Some of them have people that can be found. Some of them don't. They're all a little different, and that report sets forth what's needed in each particular instance, and I think I came up with a top 30. So I would heartily endorse this concept of joining forces with the DPW and yourselves to ask the mayor to add a line item to the budget for this purpose. I will say, in a very positive way, the city has upped its ante with respect to paving from only Chapter 90 monies, which result in about $900,000 to $1 million per year, to up to $2.5 million, which is not done in too many places. So we are able to address some of these unaccepted streets with paving, even though they're not accepted because we're not using Chapter 90 money, which could only be used for accepted streets. And the other point about this is the more streets we get accepted, the higher our Chapter 90 allotment goes. So I've always advocated to get as many streets as we can possibly get accepted. Please consider us an ally for this purpose as you work through this. I'm be happy to, if necessary, appoint a special committee to work with the director and the planning board for that purpose. It is a big priority, I think, for this council as well as yourselves.
No, thank you. It'd be very good. They appreciate it.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of history that's gone on. It's history now. Some of these unaccepted roads go back 4 and 5 decades.
Oh.
But nonetheless, they got to be fixed. And I think there needs to be an impetus. I was told that when I first ran for office, I would never get a street accepted. And I can say that's wrong in at least 2 or 3, well, probably 5 instances now.
Yeah.
With the help of Councilor Cormier and some other councilors, we've been able to get that done. So,
The biggest problem we have is not only that some of the roads are halfway decent, is getting everything done with the paperwork,
that's right.
To
A lot
get all
of
the
them
deeds.
are mostly paperwork.
okay? And it's the deeds, and get people to agree, and then all of a sudden, their property line goes to the center of the street.
That's a common, there's a
And
few,
then,
there's a
and
few
it's
like
common.
that.
And then all of a sudden, you go to the bank and say, we're gonna reduce the size of that lot. Well, we gotta rewrite the mortgage.
Well, the problem is you gotta get the bank to sign a release of the
Yeah.
real estate as well as the homeowner. You get one veto and you got a problem, so the only resolution to that is eminent domain. because the damages, there are really no damages to take that property by eminent domain, because it gets used as a street either way. It affects the value of the property, not one iota.
No.
But it's a legal process, and, it takes time, and we have to pay attention to this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to get done. That's the
what
bottom line.
That's what most of our problems is. Years ago, Babe Pilecki, was a builder back in the 60s, and he showed me the subdivision regulations that he had. It was basically this, about 4 pages folded over, and that was all the subdivisions that they had in the city in 1960. So everybody did pretty much what they wanted to do, and there was no control.
Well, it's a new world. Councilor Frida, did you have a question?
Yeah, before the question, I think that's an important piece that we just talked about with the ownership going to the middle of the street and the fee in the street being held by the developer and long gone and going to the homeowner on both sides. I mean, we worked for years with Attorney Campobasso as the Assistant City Solicitor for the whole Independence and Bicentennial area after a bus literally fell into a sinkhole as it was picking kids up to go to school. That was a 5-year project to get that whole area done with both sides of the street, and we didn't do eminent domain. We actually did do, the mayor was pretty diligent. About 2/3 of the neighborhood had to sign on. So, I mean, it was a long process, but it gets done if it gets started, and there's been a number of projects that have been successful because of that. So, but the other question that I wanted to mention, or to have you mention, I think a lot of people get confused. We know the planning board is the board of permitted uses, and the zoning board is the board of non-permitted uses. We hear that all the time. But once the planning board has finished their work in terms of approval or disqualifying, but going on the approval section, when a year later things aren't followed through that the planning board has said had to be done, at what point, we know the building inspector, we've mentioned him a number of times tonight, is the zoning officer. At what point do people need to be contacting the building inspector as opposed to the planning board? Because they think they attended all these meetings at the planning board, they come back to the planning board for action, and it's essentially out of your hands at that point. It's a zoning issue with the building inspector. So at what point is that established?
Good question. I think pretty much we take things case by case. If they're still in construction, it's the planning board. If we've given final releases, then it's the building inspector, okay? And if the ZBA gets involved, that's usually on the setbacks. They want to change something, and then they can get variances on side setbacks and some other cases that they follow also. So they're pretty much after the fact, and we're trying to close that loop more and more and more so that we have higher bonds, more control over the developers so that it doesn't happen. But in some cases, it's like, closing the barn door after the horse is gone. So we're trying to, but we know that. We're trying to correct it, but it takes time to write the ordinances, to get things squared away, to get the right proper verbiage in there. And there's somebody always trying to find another way around to get something done to benefit them.
Counselor, is part of your question, at what point do the enforcement officers go in and take a look at something? I mean, maybe we need another enforcement officer instead of just the
Well, we've
building
said that for
inspector.
years. We've had that discussion many times down here.
Because once it leaves us and we have conditions on it, or there's special permits, we're not out in the field
Right.
checking construction.
And sometimes that doesn't get caught.
Right.
And then people move into the property, and then they sell the property 2 years later, and all of a sudden, they
It's a
start
mess.
looking and finding out, hey, this wasn't done the way it was supposed to be done. So who's looking, who's watching?
Well, there's
the
a gap
store?
there. I think there's a gap there because the building
Absolutely.
inspector is looking at the plumbing, the wiring, the house placement, stuff like that. When I think there's a disconnect, and there's got to be someone else in that space, because
Yeah,
we're not the enforcement. We just approve
Exactly.
what's in front of us.
The
That's
the
why-
leverage you have is money, and that's about it.
Correct.
Yeah, and what we are doing is I've talked to Elizabeth at it, and I mentioned it earlier, is we're looking at, new conditions for site plans. And that's basically what to do is tying in all the conditions to a site plan prior to, and what those conditions might be prior to acceptance for occupancy. So we're trying to we're in the process of trying to write that now, okay, so that we can tie that in, so that we work with the building inspector. We don't want to, we're not, the building commissioner, we want to look over his shoulder, but we want to sort of give a guideline and get the proper documentation that the conditions are set forth and they're not separated between the outside, and the inside. I'll make it easy.
That's a powerful tool, because no bank is going to is going to release the last requisition until the CO is issued.
That's right.
So-
So we're working on that now.
Okay. Any other questions before we finish? I want to thank you very much for coming down tonight. I think it was productive.
I'd just like to open the board and question any of my members that have any questions or comments. They're usually not quiet.
Well, that's good. We flushed it all out. So, appreciate you coming here this evening. Thank you for all showing up, and keep up the hard, good work. And we certainly can improve, and we all can work together to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, have a
Thank
great
you.
meeting.
You too.
I'm sorry, guys, I'm sorry.
Are you the ambassador for the planning board?
No, I'm just, I'm not running for office. I just have to say hi to my friends. That's all.
Nice to see you, Sal.
Sal.
You're pinch hitting for the Chair of Legal Affairs this evening, and the next item we have is a public hearing on 6-22.
Yes, we do. Petition 6-22, City Council Vice President David R. Cormier, requests to amend Chapter 13, Article 3, Division 2, Section 13 through 34, no parking on certain streets, and add the following. Regarding Tucker Drive, both sides from the intersection of Francis Street for 200 feet. This has been before Legal Affairs, was given regular course in July, on July 12th. This is our public hearing, and I will go to the audience to see if there are any comments from anybody in the audience, anybody who would like to speak in favor of this petition. I'll ask once. Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who'd like to speak against it? For the first time, for the second time, is there anybody who'd like to speak against it? And for the final and third time, is there anybody who'd like to speak against it? I guess I should have gone to the council first. Did I do that?
That's fine.
All right. Is there anybody on the council who has any questions about this petition? Council Cormier.
Thank you very much. I obviously don't have any questions, but I just want to explain the reason, the purpose for
Sure.
this. So I guess I'll kind of, you'll get the gist of the next one as well. I got a complaint from, even though it is mostly industrial up there, I did get a complaint. There are a couple of homes that are there, I'm assuming pre-existing non-conforming, but nevertheless, Somebody considers that their neighborhood, that's where they live. And this is right on the corner up there when you're turning from Tucker Drive onto Francis Street. There's been a lot of cars that have been parking there. I think some of them work at AIS, and I don't know why they've been parking there, but one of the neighbors told me they're not allowed to smoke on company property, so they park there. They go sit in their cars and smoke on their lunch breaks and stuff like that. But in any event, whatever the reason for the parking is from the employees that work at some of these businesses, it's very tight for tractor trailers to turn to when they're making that curve. And you know, there's been a lot of trash thrown out of windows that the neighbors aren't too happy about, and all these other things. So it's just, I don't think it's an appropriate place for parking. There is plenty of off-street parking. I'm assuming, you know, many years ago when we just had the planning board here, you know, site plan approval, I'm sure that they have more than enough parking spaces to accommodate the vehicles that need to park at those businesses. So there's just no need to park on that street. The purpose is for tractor-trailer trucks that are, many of them up there that are trying to get through. And I think it'd be a lot safer and cleaner to keep all the cars parked elsewhere. So that is the reason for this petition.
Thank you very much. Again, I'll go to the council. Are there any other folks who want to weigh in on this or have an opinion? Okay, and nobody from the public spoke. So my recommendation at this point would be to close the public hearing.
Very well, that may be done. We'll then go to the next public hearing, which is on 7-22. You ready to start that, Counselor?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Petition 7-22, City Council Vice President David R. Cormier requests to amend Chapter 13, Article 3, Division 2, Section 13-34, no parking on certain streets, and add the following. Regarding Francis Street, both sides from number 50 to Tucker Drive. So this has been before the Legal Affairs Committee, was given regular course on July 12th, 2021, and tonight is our public hearing. I will go to the audience. Is there anybody who would like to comment or speak in favor of this petition? Is there anybody, again, for the second time who'd like to speak in favor? And for a third time, is there anybody who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Are there any people who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? For the second time, is there any opposition to 722? And for a third and final time, is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to this petition? Hearing none, I will go to the City Council. And Councilor Cormier, the petitioner, would you like to speak on this?
Actually, I do have a question. It's the same situation as the other one. It's just obviously one street turns into another, so I had to petition them separately. If I may, Madam Clerk, did we hear police? They're all set,
do.
right?
Yeah, we have both
traffic.
referrals.
Okay. And everything's good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
No, that's all I have for this one.
Okay. Both referrals are in for both petitions, which is why my recommendation was to close the first public hearing, and I'll do so again. So my recommendation would be to close the public hearing on 722.
Very well. Thank you, Counselor. All right, now we'll take up the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for a member of the audience to speak on a matter specifically listed on the council agenda. Speakers will be asked to come to the microphone and state their formal name and address, along with identifying the specific item or items they wish to address. Each speaker is respectfully asked to keep their comments within a 2-minute time frame. The council will not be responding or answering any questions. However, at the discretion of the council president, clarification may be given. Is there any member of the public that wishes to address the City Council relative to an agenda item this evening? Please identify yourself and the item that you wish to address.
Hi, Michael Stassen, 893 Main Street. I just wish to speak briefly on Communication C16. This is an amendment to previous communication CO3, which is the appropriation to the school department budget for the E-rate rebate. So just to remind everyone, the school department pays in full for the internet services bill, but then a large portion of that, about 74% of it, gets reimbursed. So the general budget that you approved includes money for the portion that we end up paying. The supplemental appropriation is to cover the reimbursement. When we did this communication of 3, I believe there was a simple miscommunication because the previous amount was the entire bill rather than the rebate amount. So this amendment simply corrects back to the rebate amount, slightly lower, but it's not somebody trying to take money away from us. It was just the previous amount was a little bit higher than it was supposed to be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stassen. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to address the city council in the public forum? And I'll ask a second time, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the city council in the public forum? And a third and final time, is there any member of the public that wishes to address the city council in the public forum? Seeing none, I will declare the public forum closed. We are now back in session, starting with communications from the mayor and C-16.
C-16, Dean J. Mazzarella, Mayor, request to amend Appropriation C-03 to state an appropriation of $220,534 be made to the school department expense account, the same amount to be raised by fiscal year 2022 E-rate revenue.
C-16 is referred to the Chairman of Finance.
First time on the calendar, Mr. President, regular course.
Very well. C-16 has been given regular course. Moving on to C-17.
C-17, Dean J. Mazzarella, requests that an appropriation of $4,350 be made to the Conservation Department expense account, the same amount to be transferred from the stabilization fund.
C-17 is referred to the Chairman of Finance.
First time on the calendar, regular course.
Very well. C-17 has been given regular course. Now on to petitions, first time on the agenda.
Request to sign the election order for the November 2nd, 2021 municipal election.
And the request to sign the election order for the November 2nd, 2021 municipal election is referred to the Chairwoman of Ways and Means.
Yes, Mr. President, regular course, but I'd like to just ask the clerk. I was just looking at where this order is posted, and in some areas on here that nobody would ever see. Nobody goes in the wastewater treatment plant. Nobody goes in the cemetery department. Maybe if we could just have, if there are any ward councilors that have some public places in their ward, that they might want to have this posted, they can get in touch with you before the next meeting. We can amend this and
Sure. Yeah.
get it out more publicly to where the voting places are.
Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. We're not bound by specific places by our charter, and it actually requires us just to follow Mass General Law. So legally, we only have to post it in the City Hall. So I've just taken what I've inherited from the years past, but we can definitely amend it any way that feels more comfortable for public viewing.
All right. Might be a case of more is better. All right. Anything else, Counselor?
No, that's
Okay, so the request for the election order execution has been given regular course, and councilors that want to expand the list of posted places, please contact the city clerk before the next meeting. All right, moving on to matters before the city council, starting with the financial report. Is the chairman ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President, we started the fiscal year on July 1, 2021 with $19,904,602.80. Pending all of the items that are on here this evening for the first time and a possible vote the next time, we will have spent $125,792.03, and that would leave us with a balance of $19,778,810.77, and that is a financial report.
Any questions for the chairman of finance? Seeing none, we'll move on to financial matters, starting with C5. Is the chairman ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President, C-05, Dean J. Mazzarella, Mayor, requests that an appropriation of $36,000 be made to the collective bargaining contract services account, the same amount to be transferred from the stabilization fund. This is regarding a salary study. This was on our agenda the last time, and we gave it further time. There were some questions as to exactly what positions were being looked at. I think we have a very detailed list now, and I know that the Ward 5 counselor had a question. I guess when we poll our committee, you can ask him if his concerns have been addressed as well by the mayor, but I'm certainly satisfied. I think this is long overdue. It's been talked about for a long time. And I certainly would like to get this moving forward and see what we come up with and then go from there. So it would be my recommendation that we grant C-05, and I'll ask that you check with members of my committee.
Very well. Councilor Pauline Cormier
I would agree.
and Councilor Angelini.
I would agree as well. I'd just like to note that I did have a chance to talk to the mayor about this, and just he verified that it is all non-union employees who would be reviewed. And obviously, there are some folks who've gone quite a while without the compensation increases that they've seen some of their colleagues get. So I will be supporting this as well this evening.
Thank you, Councilor Angelini. You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to grant C-5. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of granting C-5, please recognize in the usual manner. Anyone opposed? C-5 is granted by a vote of 7-0. Does the chairman have an order?
Yes, Mr. President, order that the sum of $36,000 be made to the collective bargaining contract services account, the same amount to be transferred from the stabilization fund. This is once again regarding a salary study. Move for the adoption of the order.
You've heard the request for the adoption of the order. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the order, please say yay. Yay. Anybody opposed? The order is adopted by a vote of 7-0. Moving on to C-15. Is the chairman ready to report?
Yes, Mr. President, C-15, Dean J. Mazzarella, Mayor, requested an appropriation of $40,188.90 be made to the Building Department Capital Outlay Expense Account, the same amount to be transferred from the Stabilization Fund. This is regarding a Building Department truck. One of the questions that I had immediately asked was, how old is the vehicle that we are replacing and whatnot, and I was told that this vehicle is actually, it's not replacing anything, it's just a new vehicle. I guess the gentleman that does the maintenance, when he was hired, he had a truck, he used his own vehicle. It was never really a contractual thing or a condition of his employment that he was going to use his own vehicle, but he did. Then the truck started getting old, was breaking down, and he decided he was going to get more of a compact vehicle for himself and his family. And he told the city that he didn't have a vehicle anymore that was going to he was going to be able to use. So the city realized that they should get him a truck to transport supplies and things of that nature, and also he's going to be able to plow the parking lot here at City Hall. In which he, and maybe other parking lots as well, in which he, for buildings in which he maintains, and that'll free up someone from the DPW, usually comes and takes care of those places as well. So it would be my recommendation that we grant C-15, and I'll ask that you check with members of my committee.
Councilor Pauline Cormier?
I agree.
Councilor Angelini?
I'll make it unanimous, Mr. President.
Thank you. You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Finance Committee to grant C-15. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Frida?
Through the chair to the finance chair, is this just going to be for the janitor or the maintenance person? Or is the building department going to be using it as well?
I think I've been told it's going to be for the maintenance person. I don't know that the building department in general is going to use it or not. But
Is anybody going to be taking this truck home?
that I don't know. I can find out, though.
I mean, it just seems like a pretty hefty description of a car with safety for teenagers, not to be able to drive it. I mean, there just seems to be a lot of, I don't know if it was included in the price and it was just standard, but just seemed to be a lot of extras that you probably wouldn't really need in a lot of instances. So I was just curious as to who would have use for the vehicle.
Right. I'll find out exactly who's going to be authorized to use it and whether it will be going home. Obviously, there's some vehicles, I know there's been an issue in the past, there's some vehicles in the city that do go home, and they go home because it's either contractual with the city or in some cases like fire and police, it's state law that they take them home.
Yeah, that's...
So, but yeah, this obviously is not dictated by law. I will ask if it's going to be parked here or if it's going to be taken home. I will ask that question. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor of granting C-15, please recognize in the usual manner. Those opposed, by a vote of 7 to 0, C-15 has been granted. Do you have an order?
Yes, Mr. President, order that the sum of $40,188.90 be made to the Building Department outlay expense account, the same amount to be transferred from the stabilization fund. Once again, this is regarding a Building Department truck. Move for the adoption of the order.
You've heard the request for the adoption of the order. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the order, please say yay.
Yay.
Anyone opposed? The order is adopted by a vote of 7 to 0. Moving on to legal affairs, and 75-21, is the chairwoman ready to report?
75-21, Elizabeth Wood, on behalf of the Planning Board, requests to amend the zoning ordinance pertaining to the regulation of dumpster location and screenings. This petition, we have a public hearing scheduled on September 27th at 6:50 p.m. So my recommendation would be for further time, and you can check with my other committee member.
Councilor David Cormier, I assume you're in accord?
I am.
You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to grant 75-21 further time. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of granting 75-21, please recognize in the usual manner. Those opposed, 75-21 is given regular time by vote of 7 to 0. Moving on to 6-22, is the chairwoman ready to report?
I am. Mr. President, 6-22, City Council Vice President David R. Cormier requests to amend Chapter 13, Article 3, Division 2, Section 13-34, no parking on certain streets, and add the following. Regarding Tucker Drive, both sides from the intersection of Francis Street for 200 feet. We concluded our public hearing earlier this evening, and we do have two referrals in. The referral from the police department, for the public record, I'll read it. It says, Ms. Reardon, the police department is not in opposition to the above attached no parking referrals. Thank you, Lieutenant Mark Amico. We also have the referral back from Peter Niall, the building commissioner. Members of the Legal Affairs Committee, I am in receipt of a communication dated August 24th, 2021, for recommendation on petition 6-22, and this proposed amendment sounds reasonable with this department. If you have any questions or need further information, please feel free to contact my office. So with those two referrals in hand, my recommendation is to grant 6-22.
Very well. You heard the unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to grant 6-22. I assume the author is in accord as well?
I am.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, this will be by roll call vote, starting with Councilor Frida.
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Angelini.
Yay.
Councilor Arndinger.
Yay.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor David Cormier.
Yay.
And I shall be recorded as yay. By a vote of 7 to 0, 6-22 has been passed. Moving on to 7-22.
Petition 7-22, City Council Vice President David R. Cormier requests to amend Chapter 13, Article 3, Division 2, Section 13-34, no parking on certain streets, and add the following. Regarding Francis Street, both sides from number 50 to Tucker Drive. Again, we concluded our public hearing, we closed our public hearing earlier this evening, and we do have the two referrals from the police department from traffic and from the building department. Again, the police department states it is not in opposition to the above referenced, above attached no parking referrals. And Peter Niall, the building commissioner, also states that the proposed amendment sounds reasonable with this department. So with the referrals in hand and no one speaking in opposition to these earlier tonight, my recommendation would be to grant 7-22.
And I'm going to guess that the Ward 3 councilor is in accord.
That is correct.
You've heard the unanimous recommendation of the Legal Affairs Committee to grant 7-22. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be by roll call vote, starting with Councilor Frida.
Yay.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Yay.
Councilor Angelini.
Yay.
Councilor Arndinger.
Yay.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Yay.
Councilor David Cormier.
Yay.
And I shall be recorded as yay. 7-22 has been passed by a vote of 7 to 0. Moving on to city property and 8-22. Councilor Angelini, are you ready to report?
Excuse me, I am indeed, Mr. President. This is regarding the Johnny Appleseed Arts and Music and Arts Festival. We've been asked by the mayor's office to extend the footprint, enlarge the footprint a little bit. If you recall, at our last meeting, we were provided with a map that indicates the layout of the festival, including the area that it's being expanded to. We also asked for referrals from the police and DPW and fire. I believe we have received all of them, if I may, Mr. President, for the record.
If you just would read the petition before you give us the referrals, that would be great.
Thank you. Let's see, let me see. Oh, God, help me here.
Just page 4 on the capsulated portion is fine.
City Council President Mark C. Bonanza requests to amend petition 39-21 to include the following street closings. The Main Street intersection at the corner of Lower West Street and Upper Mechanic Street to the intersection of Main Street and Merriam Avenue. The West Street / Mechanic Street intersection shall be closed off from the point of Monument Square Park to the bank at the Mechanic Street intersection. And this is regarding the Johnny Appleseed Festival, additional road closings at the request of the mayor. And now, if I may?
Yes,
for the record, the referrals. This one happens to be from our Director of Public Works, Mr. Racine. Dear Ms. Huffman, City Council President Mark Bonanza requests to amend petition 3921 to include the following street closings. And he goes on to say that we are in favor of supporting this petition and recommend a favorable vote. We go on to the Leominster Fire Department. Dear Ms. Huffman, pursuant to your request for a recommendation on the above captioned petition, please be advised that I am in favor of the additional road closings for the Johnny Appleseed Festival and amending petition 39-21 to reflect the same. Please contact this office if you have any questions. Robert A. Sidlow, Chief. And lastly, we have a referral back from Mark Amico at the Police Department. Lieutenant Amico says, Dear Ms. Reedon, Police Department has no opposition to the proposed road closings noted below for the upcoming Johnny Appleseed Festival. Thank you, Lieutenant Mark Amico. So with all the referrals in hand and positive, I would ask you to poll my committee. I would be in support of this.
Very well. Councilor Arninger?
I agree.
Okay, you've heard the unanimous recommendation of the City Property Committee to grant 8-22. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting 8-22, please recognize in the usual manner. Anyone opposed? By a vote of 7-0, 8-22 has been granted. Do we have any new business? Seeing none, do we have any old business? Councilor Frida.
Just a quick update on the police station.
Sure.
The bids were open last Thursday. I don't have all the details, but the general consensus is we're very happy with the bid. We have a meeting this Thursday to have a discussion and hopefully move forward to the beginning of construction.
Where and what time is that meeting in case anybody wants to attend it?
I think 1 o'clock. It's a Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Greg Chapdelaine or Wendy could put anybody on if they wanted to.
Very well.
In the beginning of the bid documents, 90 contractors downloaded bid documents.
Nice.
So that was a great sign for good value. So hopefully the next meeting I'll report out on our next step, which it should be a good one.
Would you like us to put it on the agenda formally in case the public is interested?
I'm hoping that once we get past this, that I've already asked them to put something together and come down with a presentation.
Okay.
So I think Castle Booze is working on that in Daedalus. Yes, I'm kind of anxious to get that done.
Okay.
I also just wanted to take a minute in the light of September 11th. Tom Pecorelli was a member of the Leominster community in his beginning life. He lived on Debbie Drive after he was born with his parents and lived there for a few years till he moved to Newburyport, went to Fallbrook School, and suffered a tragic death. He came home for a wedding from California. He was a Fox newscaster. Very successful, very pleasant from all people that knew him. And his sister, Maria Elena Gray, is still in Sterling. His father, Nate Pecorelli, is still in Sterling. It's an awful loss. It was the mother's only son amongst sisters, daughters that she had. So I just wanted to take a minute and remember him. He left a pregnant wife. That child is now 20 years old. So kind of sad all the way around. But just take a minute to remember one of our own from this city.
Why don't we have a moment of silence, Council?
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for proposing that reflection, Councilor Frida. Anything additional? All right, anybody else have anything on the old business? How about community calendar? I know we have the Johnny Appleseed Fair coming up on the 25th downtown, as the City Property Committee reflected. On Wednesday night, I will be at the Leominster Public Library. First time I've done a book presentation in a long time because of COVID, and I will be presenting my new book, Hostage Terror, which is about a local man's survival of a hostage taking on TWA Flight 847 back in 1985. And he'll be present for a question and answer period. So anybody who's interested, please stop by. I'm really excited to be post-COVID or post some portion of COVID, and we don't know how much yet, doing something in person. So it will be nice to do that. Anybody else have anything? Nice to see the big turnout at the Leominster-Fitchburg game last Thursday night, first game in the state. We're now in a 2-game per season situation with Fitchburg, which I think is really pretty healthy for the series. And got to go back to 1916 for the last time that cities played each other twice in a season when there wasn't a playoff game involved. Could even have to play 3 times if there's a playoff game this year. But I think it's going to be bode well for the health of the series. So I was talking to the mayor earlier today. Had a great turnout on a very rainy night, and that school spirit by our young people in both cities is good to see. So thank you all. Have a safe and wonderful week. We'll see you soon. Councilor, move to adjourn. Very good. We should do that. Councilor Angelini, all in favor?
Perfect.
Thank you.
The Leominster City Council meeting is funded in part by DeCarolis Insurance Agency at www.decarolisinsuranceagency.com.